no two games are the same in a lot of ways. Your process evolves according to the content that you're working on. You're evolving a character over time. You never arrive with a character. A character is something that emerges through the process of delivering, 6,000 lines. Yeah, well, Returnal is one of those fascinating concepts. And obviously it's hugely challenging in terms of pushing the boundaries of narrative and storytelling, in terms of that, she has this really powerful emotional and psychological journey she goes through as she sort of goes through sort of the stages of grief. The commitment in terms of body and soul total is an amazing thing to kind of witness in the booth, but also the kind of realization of how far you can go.
Hi everyone, welcome to the ReadyAimFire podcast, the stories behind your favourite games.
From the talented craftspeople that bring them to life.
Today we've got Damien Goodwin with us. Nice to have you, Damien.
Good to see you.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure having you. Thank you for coming. And I personally am very happy to have you here. I had the joy of working with you in the booth. I don't think we've worked anywhere else together yet, but it was such a brilliant time. It was really creative, fun and safe, and I loved it. But beyond that, you have a breadth of work across lots of creative mediums with lots of different hats. And I did make a list because it was extensive and I've probably missed something out. Teaching, acting, corporate, TV, film, writer, producer, and obviously director in lots of those mediums as well. And mainly today, we're here to talk about video games. And I cannot wait to hear about how you started in the industry and what brought you through that into video game directing.
It was like a lot of things that happen in the industry. It was a chance meeting. Essentially, I started off as an actor, and years and years ago, I did a production of Hamlet at the Sheffield Crucible, and I worked with an actor called Mark Healy. We had this sort of chance encounter on a train. I just returned from, I was directing Hollyoaks at the time. I just come back and I was on my way to the BBC to do a 3D director's course, training drama directors and directing 3D television. Whatever happened to that?
Oh, wow.
I used to have the glasses and everything.
Yeah.
3D like that with the glasses on?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I loved it.
Yeah, and I bumped into Mark on a train. He was on his way to Side UK, as it was at the time, which was an outsourced company who provide sort of voiceover production and audio for games. And he was directing games at that point himself.
When are we talking? What year is this?
So this was like 14 years ago. 14 years ago. Anyway, it just so happened that when he arrived that day, Andy Emery, who was running the company, was saying, I'm looking for a director to step in on this project. And Mark very kindly knew that I was directing TV and just said, well, I've just met Damien on the train. And he said, okay, we'll bring him in, we'll give him a go. So it was just like a really fortuitous thing, as very often happens. It's like chance encounters in odd places that kind of lead you down different creative avenues. And it very quickly felt like a really comfortable fit for sort of my skill base and the things that I was interested in, and the kind of sort of storytelling that excited me.
What was the game?
It was Dragon Age. It was one of
Dragon Age?
Inquisition.
Two.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was a brilliant start, actually, because working with BioWare, who had a really terrific system in place. There was a great cast. It was a great way. It was a very kind of complex narrative. And it was working with lots and lots of different actors, obviously playing the roles. And it was a great way to begin and to start to realize the amount of, to what extent, a director is useful within that kind of situation in terms of guiding the actors and kind of working out the story and collaborating with BioWare and the team there in order to build the story. So there were a couple of directors that were on that, and I was one of them. But it was a really brilliant game to begin the sort of performance director journey in games with.
So what's like the major difference that you experienced then and since that point of directing actors for like television, like Hollyoaks, and then directing people for performance capture and voice work in a video game. Obviously, their face isn't going to end up necessarily on in the game itself, but they're still living and breathing a character. So what's the major difference as a director when you're talking to talent?
So first of all, it's probably useful to start by talking about the fact that no two games are the same in a lot of ways, and you in terms of process, you have to sort of refine that each time according to what you're actually doing on a game. Because in terms of performance directing a game, as you say, you can be directing the performance capture and the voice. You can be dealing with all of the narrative content, or you can be doing a portion of it, and you can be collaborating with another director or two on that material as well. Your process evolves according to the content that you're working on. And so sometimes in terms of your preparation, if you're doing the performance capture, you may have, similar to kind of film and TV, a bit of a pre-production period where you can work with a narrative team, the cinematic team, the animation team. You can go through kind of a relatively hefty casting process in order to find the right actors. You can work with the writer, like looking at, sort of drafts the cinematic scenes and feedback to them, and it can be very, very involved. But equally so, you can be sent a script like a day or so before, and you can sort of be airdropped into a situation where a development team have been working on a project for a number of years, and you're very much dealing with things on the fly. And so you're having to get your head around a lot in a short amount of time. And obviously your job is about trying to make the process as easy as possible for the actor. And so you're trying to answer the questions that you feel that the actor needs in order to perform at their best. And also, it's such an... One of the things that's always really interesting about video games is you're relying a lot on the actor's instincts, imagination, and adaptability, because essentially they are kind of interpreters of that material, and you're kind of part of that process in terms of allowing them to interpret in the most kind of organic way possible. But you're also relating that to a team who have their own kind of demands. They kind of may have, they'll have all of the, much more of the context, or sometimes they don't. And they will, know certain things that they want delivered in certain ways. They may know how a bit of cinematic feeds into a bit of gameplay. So, you work with the actor as sort of detectives together, sort of unraveling the nuances and context and trying to perform the line or the scene as kind of authentically as possible as that particular character.
I remember with you and in other experiences as well, it's the language you speak to the actor sometimes, isn't it? Sometimes when I haven't had a director there, the technical side wants certain things from you, and you don't have that middle ground of yourself, let's say, who knows maybe what they want and knows how to translate that to an actor. And if we haven't got that director in the middle, which sometimes happens, less so these days, it takes longer, like it's less efficient, and you're like, what's this? And so the fact maybe as well, undoubtedly the fact that you're an actor yourself, you have been an actor for years before going into directing, that language is probably there, the shorthand between maybe the company, the games company, to yourself and then to the actor is a lot quicker and a lot clearer and more creative, I would say, for actors a lot of the time. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's a really interesting relationship between a performance director and an actor, because and essentially it really reminds me, both as a director and an actor, of being in a rehearsal room. The thing I enjoyed most when I was acting was the kind of rehearsal room process when you're essentially throwing ideas around and you're trying things out. And we all know that actors perform at their best when they feel relaxed, able to kind of fail and to take risks, and they understand what they're doing. So it's a kind of an important kind of part of the process, and so it's a bit like, so it always feels to me like you're kind of revisiting that sort of feeling, essentially, and that and also the thing is that and there's sometimes of pressure, I think. Actors, especially new to it, feel that they've got to be right very, very quickly. But it's also the realization that within that process, you are you're evolving a character over time. You never arrive with a character. A character is something that emerges through the process of delivering, 6,000 lines.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like trying and failing together, and sometimes running into brick walls, and sometimes working out that certain things don't work, and trying to find the best, the most positive way to make things work.
Well, how much of a say do you have over how a script is brought to you to deliver to the actors?
Again, it really depends on the project. And it depends on what has been written and what has been delivered. Right. But sometimes, on some of the projects where you're on a project for a long time and you come in it early in the process, and you're kind of like, you can sort of help the development team understand how might be best to do that material. Sometimes sometimes if it's quite difficult and challenging material, you might suggest, I think we should do it in this order, because in the same way that you would do if you were kind of shooting TV, if we can schedule this here, I think it will help further down the line that the actor's gone through this in order to get to this point here. Unfortunately, that's not the norm, but I think if you you try and again, find the best way to do it. And sometimes that's a kind of an education for the development team in terms of understanding that you have an awareness about how actors work and how they may work at their best, and how, because the greatest feeling is when an actor takes ownership of a character, and then actually then you realize that you've got to the point where actually your direction is very slight. It's just because you feel that the actor has an understanding in their body and in their being, and that and then the great thing is then you're completely surprised by, if looking at what we worked on together, it's like you had to take ownership of not only the character, but a different language, and a created language.
That was amazing.
A created dialect.
Yeah.
And you had
this is Greedfall. Right?
This is Greedfall, yeah. And you also had to not only understand and imbibe those things, but also make it feel that that's come from a real person. You could look at different processes, even like theatre, and you would be working with a voice coach for maybe a number of weeks during rehearsals in order to find that. But I think we had like a 4-hour session.
Didn't we? That was quite cool, because that was with 4 of the other actors. Is that when we had the...
Yeah.
So quite rarely are you in the booth together with anyone else. And so that was nice just to see the faces and all be on the same page with the accent. I remember I think it was 4 or 5 of us in a room who were from Tirfredi, if I remember rightly.
That's right,
It's a while ago now.
Yeah.
And that was fascinating. This gentleman had written this language.
He's created a language.
Created a language.
So, yeah. But that's, in terms of like the challenges that can be thrown at you. That's such a contracted period to kind of understand, to step inside a language, a dialect, but also a way of thinking of a people who are totally connected to the natural world and the magic of the natural world. And then you have to stand on your own in a booth, and you have to deliver that like you are authentically that person. And so the kind of collision between technique, instinct, and adaptability become really, really important within that in that process.
Which is why you so absolutely need a director who's really good to guide you through that.
And you need actors who are terrific as well.
So when you're obviously your background, you start out acting. When you will obviously approach each role, like you said, and you have a way of preparing for it. When you're working with other actors as a director, do you want them to prepare in the way that you would prepare as an actor, or is it a very personal thing, or does it depend on the project, on the character?
The fascinating thing is that all actors are different. So I think, I kind of approach it a bit like you approach friendship. Mm-hmm. It's like your friends need different things, and your relationships according to those people kind of evolve in different ways. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the important thing is just trying to find out what kind of makes the actor tick. Some are very technical, some kind of like, so they move from the outside in, some may move from the inside out. Mm-hmm. Some may like you to talk a lot and tell you a lot about the background. Some may like just really simple information that just allows them to understand the line that they're delivering at that time. And so, but I suppose, that sort of sense of working with, I love actors, and because I was one, I kind of feel like I empathize with what it's like to be an actor and how you may feel dealing with certain types of material. And I'm also aware that that you need the right conditions in order to perform at your best. And very often you have to, shooting television taught me that the pressure is always on to get the day finished. And very often the schedules are very, very tight. But you can't pass that on to an actor as a director, the pressures that are on you, because what you need them to feel is like kind of sort of protected and surrounded by the fact that it's not, that's because otherwise that's kind of transferable, that stress.
You need to give them the space to explore.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you have to make choices according to that. Maybe you may come with your camera plan and say, I want to do this in 5 shots, but then you realize I'm going to do it in 1 because actually I can feel this could work in the performance, so we can kind of hold it in 1 kind of tracking shot or something. And so that sort of adaptability, which I think is really important in games, being agile and being able to kind of flip on a coin going, actually, I'm going to do it this way because I think it's working better for the actor, or I think it's working better for the writer, or, that's because you've also got those ears to consider as well.
So would you say that's an easier process in gaming? Like if you're doing, say, performance direction, like changing a shot on the fly, does that send the development team into a panic, or are they quite happy to make those changes on the fly?
Well, I mean, the brilliant thing about performance capture is because you're sort of, it's like shooting theatre in the round, is that the shots go in afterwards.
Right, okay.
So you can really focus on the performance. And I always kind of consider myself quite a performance-focused television director. So there's something really liberating about that, because you may have an understanding of how that scene may be cut together, but actually you don't need to worry necessarily about that at the time, because you're focusing on what is the realist performance. How's this scene working? What are the characters? How are they getting what they want or not getting what they want? And how's this going to move into the next scene of gameplay? Because the important thing in games is that it's about the player, and what you're doing is you're trying to encourage the player to make certain choices. So in your head, whereas in film and TV, I can tell a story and I can make it, about what I want to tell the story about and hope the audience comes to me on that. In games, you're always aware that it's about motivating the player to make certain choices through the interactions of the character. And so your mind's in a slightly different spot when you're doing that.
It's really interesting.
So with that then, with the gameplay and the cinematics, is there a big difference in how you would approach directing an actor in that? Have you noticed maybe a shift over the last 14 years of where the gameplay has become a bit more creative rather than necessarily hold the wheel, turn the wheel?
Yeah. It's been interesting. They're doing it for like 14 years now. As you've seen, there's been a massive evolution in terms of games, and actually the way performances come across in games, and in kind of like the early days there was the stories have become a lot more complex. The performances, are incredibly nuanced and kind of rich and psychological and all these things. So I think that, so the challenges with more ambitious storytelling is that you want to immerse your player and you want to keep them with the story. We all have seen those games and that sort of cinematics where there's a sort of real disconnect between the physical character and the voice, and the way that performance capture's moved on, and facial capture, and actors being not only the voice but the physicality, that kind of synergy of bringing those things together. I think that's really helping put sort of good performance at the forefront of a gaming experience. And also that in terms of when you're going from gameplay to cinematic, what you don't really want is that sort of jarring in terms of like you come out of a cinematic scene and then you start the gameplay and there's suddenly, why is that character suddenly shouting? Whereas at the end of the cinematic, they were like being really intimate. And so it's like building in those sorts of transitions where it feels like it's one story going through and the characters are a whole. The challenging thing, of course, is that there's still, you can have a great number of performers playing one character. You still have, one being the physicality, maybe one being the face. You've got the stunt doubles. Yeah. You maybe got like body doubles as well. You may be kind of capturing the kind of face and the physicality of a certain actor and then kind of using that as the rig on another actor. So the eye in terms of bringing those things and making it feel like that character is one being is something that I think is of great benefits to the stories in games, but also means that the experience is much more fulfilling. And that's why having an eye on those sorts of things is important.
Do you find that there are putting more actors as the one now? So one actor is playing everything? Or is it still a mixture of the two a lot of the time, where you've got maybe performance capture or motion capture by somebody else and then somebody else in the booth, and you're trying to mesh
in
the
my
two?
experience, I've done sort of 3 kind of quite big performance capture games recently, and all of the main cast were also the voice cast as well. The great benefit of the performances, actually. That's not to say that it can't work the other way as well, but I think it seems to be, a few years ago it may have been more you would do the mocap. Sometimes, you kind of play the recorded voice to a mocap actor, and they're kind of performing to somebody else's voice, and doing an amazing job at kind of like trying to embody that character. But that's, it's
skill,
really
right?
tough. Yeah.
It's a skill. Yeah.
What do you do if you have an actor who really is struggling with something like that? If there's a disconnect between the voice and the performance, or just the performance in general, and they're not quite getting it, or maybe the development team aren't necessarily happy with the performance? What's a way that you help as a director help the actor get into that character and find what we're looking for?
Well, I think firstly, it's like a sort of contracted process anyway, in terms of like expecting within 10 minutes that your actor is the character. And I mean, I always look at it. My brother, who's a fine artist, and he does a lot of portraits of people. I also think there's a kind of similarity between that kind of fine art and building a character. There's a great quote that about a real artist never rubs out, in terms of like, you make a mark on a page and you don't rub it out, you just make the mark somewhere else if something isn't working. So I think that, and that becomes a part of the portrait. So it means that you're never wrong. You're just building towards something which will become the full portrait of that person. So I suppose my feeling is you start from that point, with an actor. So it's never like, we're both trying to find this person together, and if people are interesting, they're not always like, oh, that's clearly them, that's clearly not them. You may start with certain things like saying, oh, this is the accent the character has, this may be the tonality, this is their kind of physical type, this is their age. But a character's more complex than that, and so I think with that, you just, and you're just honest. You may say to the developer, it's going to take us a little longer in these sessions to get to that point. We're not going to necessarily hit the 30 lines an hour or whatever in the first few sessions, but I believe that we'll get there, and then we'll fly, and so it's just knowing when you just need to sort of take the time. And it's about, I think a lot of this is about protecting the actor and realizing that it's part of a process and that you're building towards something. And in a similar way, sometimes you encounter things in the script that don't work and need looking at, and so then you have to address that maybe with the narrative team or the writer, or feel uncomfortable, and that's what makes it very live, the process, in terms of you're making those decisions on the fly and kind of making those realizations, and that's why it's like the rehearsal room going, hold on a minute, does this line actually work? Because it's not sacred, the material. It's about trying to find the best way of making it work.
Yeah.
And you've definitely made it feel collaborative when I've been, although this has just reminded me of the one thing you used to have to correct with me quite a lot, because it was a made-up language. You were brilliant, and you did so. And we used to have to say things like, I'm going to get it wrong now, but El Frichterman or something like that. And then obviously there is a way to say these words, and you just had this, I don't know, photographic memory. But you did it all day, I suppose, with lots of different actors, and it would be great because you'd be able to make sure we stayed on track with this made-up language. So that was one time when you would have to.
And actually sometimes there is, sometimes there's the necessity. You try not to do it, but you hopefully earn the trust of the actor, and then there are some times when you may have to do a line read. Because essentially that it's like music. It's like sometimes, I'll play a chord and you go, oh, that's the chord. And you try obviously not to do that, but there are sort of moments when that really helps and that liberate an actor. So, like combat sets, you're going to be doing the kind of emotes of like, I don't know, someone being shot or someone being stabbed. And some actors never done that before, in front of a microphone. And so sometimes in order to get it going, it's like, you need to just like, I'll do that, it's like that, and then so it's just sometimes a kind of a necessity just in order to get through the amount of material you need to in times.
I've just started playing Greedfall actually the other day.
Yeah.
I know I'm miles late, but just started playing it. I've just got to the island, so I'm about to meet the people that you all voiced. So what was it like having directed games for, since you said it was 14 years ago, and then stepping back into being an actor as well in Greedfall? Was it odd or?
Oh, are you talking about my my Hitchcock moment?
I was about to ask you this. I don't think I knew. I thought,
well, there were a lot of characters in Greedfall. There were moments. I actually have kept my voiceover agent on for years because sometimes he kind of calls up, but I don't tend to step back into. But sometimes it's really nice just to kind of step into the booth and go, oh yeah, okay. So now I know what it feels like, and and it helps the kind of process. But yeah, that was funny because the engineer was with me at that point. We had a number of characters that we needed to do to finish it, and we kind of had this deadline to do it. So I kind of picked up a few characters. Yeah, I did a couple of
to direct yourself. Great job, Damien. No.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm my worst critic. So.
right, I'm going to have to go hunting for that now. Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, it's really good. Because the second one is coming out.
Yeah, there's kind of like early access now. So when you get to the end of that one, you can hopefully move over.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So I just wanted to ask, like, what does a typical day look like for you in the studio? Whether you're directing actors, performance actors, voice actors, doesn't matter. What's a standard day for Damien?
I mean, that's the great thing about games, really. I mean, you're sort of, it never really is that standard. I mean, you are on some projects where you may be directing in the booth for like 4 weeks in a row, or if it's performance capture, then it's got a very different kind of rhythm to it. There's a great variety in it, really. There's no typical day, I suppose.
So true. No two games are the same.
Yeah,
crazy,
very true.
Yeah.
A lot of people say the same thing to us, don't they? But I mean, it's what I love about my job is the variety. Like some days I'm doing this, some days I'm doing a shoot. Most days I'm doing costings and budgeting and spreadsheets. But this is a nice.
Quite so much fun.
I'm playing games. I'm playing games.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm playing games. Yeah.
Are you a gamer? Do you play?
No, I mean, the problem is that I'm actually the clumsiest gamer in the world. And
I challenge you.
Yeah, I played FIFA a bit with my son, and I actually played. I played The Last of Us very slowly, but obviously because that was such an iconic title, and I've had a go at other games, but I just spend all the time just like banging into walls and falling off ladders. And so, but what I do is that if there's a project that I'm working on, I'll kind of watch people who are much more adept at playing, and kind of. Fortunately, there's so much content online in terms of kind of researching titles and getting a sense of tonality and worlds and universes in it, and so I kind of consume it really as an observer of other people playing. Is that you as well, Lissy?
Yeah, I've tried to play Alien Isolation actually on novice level, which is below easy, and we've just got stuck. And my partner has. We just can't get through this beginning stage, and it's quite frustrating.
It's an upsettingly terrifying game as well.
Yeah, so, I'm wanting to get past. I think we really are close to the beginning. No, we haven't got very far. I'm dying to see some kind of alien or something. Yeah, but I've watched other people play, and that's brilliant. Yeah. And I really enjoy the cinematic YouTubes, watching the kind of narrative like a film anyway.
I think the other thing is that, because there's so many games that I've worked on and I get really embroiled within the story and the characters. I think I wish I could play this, but actually play it as sort of, cohesively. Growing up, I was the classic cinema-obsessed child who wanted to stand up in the cinema and walk into the screen, so that's why games, really appeal to me is they give you that ability to be a part of that universe, but I've just wish I was less clumsy.
We'll keep trying.
Yeah, exactly.
Talking of that, the VR world, I've only ever done one job that's VR related, but you've directed quite a bit of VR games.
I've done a bit, yeah.
Is that a lot different to?
I mean, I did worked on one of kind of Sony's earlier VR games. I tell you what was really fascinating about that was the fact that, the interesting thing about VR and AR and all these sorts of mixed realities is that, you're still really uncovering the vocabulary of those and effective storytelling within them. But what was really interesting about the VR was it was a bit like we were trying things out that you felt really hadn't been tried before. And that sort of interesting thing about proximity, what feels too close, what feels too far away. The interesting thing about how you make your player react and look a particular way. Because again, you're sort of guiding the camera, you're sort of like trying to prompt certain things to happen either, by the performance or by kind of the lighting or by the sound effects.
It was the London Heist you worked on, right?
Yeah.
Because we, so Frank and I, the other half of ReadyAimFire, we actually did the trailer for Blood and Truth.
Oh, yeah.
So that was back in 2019, I think.
Yeah.
What's the London Heist?
It's like it's a sort of London sort of gangland sort of.
Think of a Guy Ritchie film, but in VR.
Guy Ritchie film. Yeah.
Lots of swearing and shooting, smoking cigarettes.
Yeah. But that was that was a really interesting process actually as well, because one of the actors who was in that, we had some rehearsals for it, and there was an actor who was originally cast who didn't turn up to the rehearsal, and one of the people from the dev said, "Oh, my dad's an actor," and anyway, we thought quickly we'd call him in, and then he came in, and he ended up being amazing, and ended up being cast in the role.
It's like the train journey, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, there we go.
Fortuitousness.
Funny.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Good on him. We haven't talked about Returnal yet.
No, I was about to move on to Returnal.
I was thinking of
Jane
Perry, the amazing Jane Perry, and I haven't played that game, and that is top of my list once I try and get into games properly in terms of playing them. Returnal just looks right at my street.
It's gorgeous. Yeah, it's very hard. Oh, it's a roguelike game, I believe. But I played it a bit. I actually got a free code from Sony, which was nice of them.
Did you?
We've made connections.
Sony.
No, it's a super cool game. But tell us more about, like, maybe for the audience's benefit, if you could explain what Returnal is for anyone who hasn't heard of it.
Returnal is one of those fascinating concepts about a woman who essentially goes on a repetitive journey over and over again, and she's sort of suffered I'm trying to think what's the spoilers or not. She suffered like a personal tragedy in her life, but she's sort of repeating the same crash on a alien planet, and she has to repeat it, but each time she repeats it, she's sort of changed and adjusted in some ways, and the sort of experiences she have, both on the kind of in terms of the monsters that she's confronting, but also in terms of her psychological journey, are kind of evolving and changing, and it's sort of leading to a place of sort of self-knowledge and discovery about what happened to her in the past and that kind of tragic event. But it's that was a brilliant experience, and Jane's fantastic, and it was so amazing that she kind of won the best performance BAFTA for that role. And what's really interesting about that is that we did that it's just because it's sort of like a one person show.
I was going to ask, it's just one character.
Yeah. Well, there are a number of there's a child, and then there's a couple of other kind of voices on the TV, and but in terms of the expanse of the narrative and what it deals with, there are very, very few voices in it, and obviously it's a hugely challenging in terms of like pushing the boundaries of narrative and storytelling, in terms of that, she has this really powerful emotional and psychological journey she goes through. She sort of goes through sort of the stages of grief. It was during the pandemic, so a lot of those, I think pretty much all of those sessions were done remotely, and we kind of had to really work out what that journey was going to be, because you can really easily fudge those kind of things in terms of, a character kind of slowly goes insane, and collaborating with Jane on that was brilliant, and we kind of found, along with the narrative director, the right way to tell that story. But it's very challenging material, and she did an amazing job. And we were kind of like, after the remote sessions, I remember we were like messaging each other, just kind of checking in terms of that, because again, it's a really kind of like you're asking an actor to be, it's very exposing that kind of role. But I knew that she was going to be really special in it, and she was brilliant to work with.
There's nowhere to hide, is there? Especially with those kind of things, it's all in the voice, and you really have to commit and go there like Jane did. And
the physical in the voice booth is so important, I think, in terms of because it was so in her body as well. There's so many times, she even just like those moments when she's sort of waking up after post-crash and she's sort of like coming around and she's kind of, and each time it gets kind of more and more kind of frantic and shocking. This the commitment in terms of body and soul total is kind of an amazing thing to kind of witness in the booth, but also the kind of realization of how far you can go. You're trying to keeping a hold of the sort of the imaginative space for the actor in terms of believing that booth is all these places you encounter is the kind of the challenge.
Have you ever worked on a game where you knew it was going to be a hit, like maybe Returnal, or did it feel because it was the pandemic it all felt maybe a bit disjointed doing things over Zoom, but is there any time you've ever worked where you're like, this is going to be a hell of a game?
The way I consume games is very much the narrative, the story and the characters. And I have a kind of an appreciation of obviously the gameplay elements and all that. But I think it's happened in two ways. One is there's sometimes when I've been pretty confident that it's going to do well. But sometimes, it's such an interesting thing with games. It's such a present audience. It's such a kind of, and in the way, a very vocal audience, and the way that games are released in terms of like these sort of the kind of the trailers and the information that's coming out about them kind of early on, and people commenting that, kind of taking ownership of it. Sometimes I've seen what I think are really good titles also go the opposite way, and I sort of think that's a real shame because actually it feels like the game has been prejudged very, very quickly. I've kind of had kind of both thoughts, and sometimes I thought the game is going to do great, and they haven't. But that's probably because I'm not a big kind of interactor myself on social media. That I just have kind of an awareness of how it can affect a game's release, and from what the fans say and the kind of comments that they have.
I suppose it's the same with any creative enterprise, right? Like with your shooting a film or making a game, you never really know if it's the next Star Wars or it's going to be in the bargain bin by the end. You're never really going to know until it's exposed to its audience. Yeah,
it's an interesting point because I wonder if the gaming community it's sort of an evolution that's happened with games that I suppose wasn't, we would... I suppose with film, I suppose it's kind of becoming more like that. But I think maybe that film has the benefit of the doubt for longer. Maybe because it's a shorter experience. But also I think because what's one thing I really admire about games and the gaming audience is just how invested the audience is, how passionate they are. And that's something that was really surprising to me coming over from TV about the emotional investment in a story or characters. And it's very, that's really powerful.
I'm intrigued to know what the longest you've spent. Do you know what the longest you've spent on a game from beginning to it being released?
Around the 4-year mark, I'd imagine. Certain games have worked like 4 years, and then maybe longer when the DLCs come as well.
Yeah, right.
So it can be kind of very, and especially if you're kind of like doing the performance capture elements initially, and then the voice. I mean, obviously you're not working on it solidly during that time.
Yeah, it's like on off.
It's sort of on off.
That must be so nice with the DLC though. If you've enjoyed the process, and then suddenly they're getting more content in, and you know what you're going into, and the kind of format, and then you're creating more.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Well, it is, and it's also really, really lovely when you've got the cast and you're kind of like they're coming back, and
getting the band back together.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
like and that's always really lovely as well. Yeah.
What would you say is your dream franchise, your dream project to work on?
Well, I've been really lucky that I've worked on a lot of projects that I've been really lucky to work on, and so it's a tricky question. I mean, I love. I think obviously because of my short film and TV background, I would love to do a game with some live action in it.
Okay.
I've never worked with Remedy, and I think they always do some really interesting games, and also like places like Flavorworks, who did Erica and Immortality. So yes, that always really interests me as a kind of as an evolution of that. But from a directing perspective, it's always brilliant to be with something from the beginning, to kind of get really immersed in the project so that you understand it inside out, to be across the cinematics and as well as the voice. So you've got a real sense of cohesion with the project and with the people that you're working with. Because essentially it's always about the people that you're working with and then collaborating with. That's where the excitement is, and that and some of the kind of geniuses in terms of the devs who are kind of like really striking out, trying to do new things and kind of going along on that journey with them. So so those sorts of that's why those kind of long projects are always really, really appealing, because they just like make you feel like you're a real part of the project, and that you've got something to contribute.
I've got one question we haven't asked. How would a director, somebody who wanted to direct games, get into games?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because it's become like really popular, and especially sort of because I remember, like a lot of my TV director friends during the pandemic, for example, they weren't working, and they were like, well, how do I get into games? Because it seems that that seemed to be an area that was keeping going during the pandemic, and I think now there's it's interesting. I got quite a few emails from like theatre directors and people coming up through different disciplines. I think the interesting thing about directing is I think I suppose it's being kind of like really honest with yourself. It's like this form is definitely really what I am passionate about doing. So I think seeing it as a kind of like a sort of a slightly easier route to work, is one thing, but actually being genuinely impassioned by stories in games, because then you sometimes have conversations and it's clear that they don't really know the world of games, and it's just sort of but I think I think that you can just be hungry for trying to meet with people who are kind of making games, and get part of the community if you like, and shadow if you can, and also, it's jumping between disciplines, kind of sometimes going back to theatre and doing some theatre, or sometimes doing some TV, just kind of keeps you fresh, and then coming back to games, because they all kind of feed into one another. So I think that, even if you're doing like a theatre show and then you want to get into games as well, I think it's so many of those are transferable skills and kind of skills that you bring from one to the other.
How much would you say that you, off the back of that how it works behind like the genius technicians and stuff behind the camera, you've kind of delved into kind of have a certain understanding as a director of what they do behind the camera before the performance?
I'm quite geeky about my tech, but I also have got like the complete realization that there are certain things that I'm going to understand and certain things that I'm not going to understand. I mean, there was certainly a good deal of catching up I had to do in terms of understanding narrative and coding for me is just completely, I have absolutely no idea, and I'm not even going to pretend that I do, but knowing enough is, and also in terms of knowing what people's jobs are, because games are so collaborative, and they got such big teams, and it's sort of knowing, what the team needs, kind of like from the animators to your audio directors, cinematics teams, and so it's getting your head around the fact that you know what people's roles are, you understand them, and you kind of having the right conversations with the right people in terms of trying to get that from the shoot or the booth. So,
I love that. That's it, exactly. A bit, and also like on TV, isn't it? Knowing why the lighting guy's there and why they need to take time to do certain things, why you need to calibrate the space and all that stuff, isn't it? Knowing why that's happening. Handy, but sometimes, and then that gets to a point for me anyway, and I'm like, no, this doesn't. It's a different language now, but I get it to hear.
You kind of you understand it enough, but it's that's the Chris Nolan school, isn't it? He did a little bit of sound, a little bit of camera, a little bit of so he kind of could understand all of those things, and if he needed to, jump on sound as pertinent, but he could because he knew enough to do that. Yeah.
There's that story of James Cameron, who's similar in that he did a bit of everything. Which was the one he directed, Aliens. Yeah, Aliens. They had to have the face hugger jump on the camera, so he left like the B unit to go and do it. And he came back like 2 hours later and they hadn't done it. He's like, I don't understand. Like, obviously, he got quite angry, famously angry man. And he was like, why don't you put the face hugger on the camera, pull it off, and then reverse the shot? And they were like, oh.
Do I have to do everything?
Yeah, exactly. They were literally trying to land it directly on the lens, but there you go.
Well, so many of those things happen, I think, in when you're kind of shooting PCAP as well, or mocap, in terms of even when you're working with the stunts, because there's such a lot of working out. You come with your plans in terms of we're going to do it in this way, and then you get there and you realise, maybe if we added this, or maybe we could tell the story better if we did this. So that kind of thinking on your feet. I find that really exciting. Yeah. It's always the thing that I loved actually when I was doing TV is actually when you got to the last scene of the day and you suddenly had half an hour to shoot it and you thought you were going to have an hour and a half, and it puts everyone into this space where they're just really primed and they're kind of working at their best, and sort of the and you decide you're going to cover it in your one shot, and you've the light's going and you've only got time for one take, and then you suddenly get to a space which is almost like slightly mystical in terms of like, where did that come from? It's like, and that, I find that sort of the vitality of thinking of your feet and solving problems on the fly really exciting.
I've got one more question, and then if you've got any other questions, I was going to ask, what's been your best day at work so far in terms of games?
Okay, this is like a really boring answer in terms of there are a lot. There are in each project. There's always something that feels particularly exciting, and you kind of really. And there are certain things that you kind of relish when you get to the more kind of like performances or scenes. The one thing that I think was very pertinent and powerful is. I did a game coming out of the pandemic, a game called Unknown 9 Awakening, and I'd spent a lot of time working from home over the pandemic doing games, and I remember I was working with a brilliant casting director called Jessica Jeffries, and we went. I think you may have come for this. I love your second choice. But it was just, I remember going through the streets of Soho and it was completely deserted, but we were sort of back in the room again.
Yeah.
And that kind of followed through to the performance. And it was such a brilliant cast that she got together, and it was such a fantastic team. But also because of the fact that we were suddenly in the room together with people, as opposed to being all stuck in our kind of separate kind of screens kind of, and listening in, and it was just that kind of nice feeling of like things were returning to some sort of creative normality, where despite the fact we all had masks on and we were having things stuck up our nose every day, it was kind of like a powerful kind of return to kind of creative collaboration in the room.
See, obviously you worked on Helldivers 2, which was a sort of a smash success. I don't think anyone really saw it coming. Have you got any anecdotes from working with Arrowhead and just from general work on that game?
Yeah, I was there was a director dealing with the US talent, and so kind of a lot of the Helldivers characters were recorded over there, which I had nothing to do with. But I was recording UK talent here. What stands out about that was how much fun we had recording that, just because they just found a really, really cool tone, I think, and that sort of satirical edge to it. And a lot of the material I recorded for that were kind of barks essentially, and it's really refreshing to do kind of barks when the lines are so well kind of thought through, and there was a terrific bunch of actors who just like threw everything at it. So my resounding memory of Helldivers, and from the moment I saw the trailer, I thought, oh yeah, this is actually, when you talk about something that you think is going to be successful, I was thinking, yeah, this just really catches something that it's become almost more relevant in terms of its sort of evangelical democracy in it.
Super Earth.
Yeah, and Super Earth. It was just a lot of fun, and a really lovely team, and great fun to do.
So what would you like to plug? Tell us what your socials are. Tell us where we can find you, where people can learn more about you, and if you've got any upcoming projects you're allowed to talk about.
There's some exciting ones coming out in the not too distant future. I'm not confident enough to sort of speak about them and not to be betraying NDAs. But yeah, there's some really cool ones coming out. And I'm sort of started working on a new project. This is all like stuff that is terrible because I can't really be specific about it. But I suppose, yeah, I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. I don't even remember what my name is on Instagram. I think it is my name. Damien Goodwin, director, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, there you
Not
go.
many Damien Goodwins out there.
Yeah.
So this has been the ReadyAimFire podcast. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.